The water was my sanctuary, a cool embrace that drowned out the world's noise. I was slicing through the pool in my backyard, each stroke pulling me further from the weight of the day, when a splash shattered the silence. My neighbor, Ethan, had vaulted over the fence and landed in my pool, grinning like he just won a war. I froze, treading water, my heart hammering. Ethan wasn't just any neighbor. He was the guy who'd moved in next door 6 months ago, all sharp jawlines and quiet intensity, the kind of person who made you feel like you were being seen for the first time. We'd exchange polite nods, maybe a few words about the weather, but nothing more. Now here he was uninvited, his white t-shirt clinging to his chest, water dripping from his dark hair, and that grin, God, that grin, promising trouble. What the hell, man? I sputtered, half laughing, half annoyed. You always crash pools like this. Only when the swimmer looks like he needs company. Ethan shot back, swimming closer. His voice was low, teasing, but his eyes held something heavier, something that made my breath catch. Before I could respond, he ducked under the water, disappearing for a moment, only to resurface inches from me. His hand brushed mine under the surface, a fleeting touch that felt like a spark in a storm. "You gonna kick me out, Caleb?" he asked, his voice softer now, almost daring me to say yes. I didn't kick him out. That moment in the pool, with the summer air thick and the crickets starting their evening song, was the beginning of everything. I was 22, fresh out of college, stuck in a small Ohio town where dreams went to die. My days were spent working at the local hardware store, my nights lost in books or laps in this pool, trying to outswim the feeling that I was wasting my life. I'd known I was gay since I was 16, but in a place like this, you kept that truth locked tight. Coming out wasn't just a risk, it was a reckoning. Ethan, though, was different. He was 24, a graphic designer who worked remotely, always carrying a sketchbook and a quiet confidence that made people notice him. He'd grown up in Chicago, a city that felt like another planet compared to our sleepy suburb. There was a rumor he'd left the city after some big fallout. Nobody knew what, but he carried that history in the way he moved, like someone who'd fought battles and wasn't afraid of more. That night, we stayed in the pool for hours, talking about nothing and everything. He told me about his favorite comic books, how he'd once drawn a whole graphic novel in a month. I admitted I'd always wanted to write, but the stories in my head never made it to paper. The conversation flowed like the water around us, easy and deep, until the stars were bright above and my fingers were pruned. When he finally climbed out, dripping and laughing, he looked back at me. "See you tomorrow, Caleb," he said, like it was a promise. The next day, he was back. Not in the pool this time, but at my doorstep holding 2 iced coffees and that same damn grin. "Thought you might need a caffeine hit," he said, handing me one. We sat on my porch, the summer heat pressing down, and I felt something shift inside me. It wasn't just attraction, though God knows that was there. It was the way he listened, really listened, when I talked about my fears of being stuck here forever. It was the way he didn't flinch when I let slip that I'd never had a real relationship, not with anyone. Over the next few weeks, Ethan became a constant. He'd show up with a sketchbook, drawing while I swam, or we'd walk to the diner down the street, sharing fries and stories. He told me about his life in Chicago, how he'd come out at 18 and lost half his friends, but gained a freedom he'd never trade. I envied that freedom, but I was terrified of it too. My parents were good people, but they were traditional, raised in a world where certain truths stayed unspoken. I wasn't sure they'd understand. One night, under the glow of the fairy lights my mom had strung around the backyard, Ethan leaned closer as we sat by the pool. "You ever think about leaving this place?" he asked, his voice low, like he was sharing a secret. "Every day," I admitted, "but it's not that simple." "It never is," he said, his eyes searching mine. "But you don't have to do it alone." His words hung between us, heavy with possibility. I wanted to reach for him, to close the distance, but fear kept me rooted. What if this was just a summer fling to him? What if I let myself feel this, and it broke me? Then he did something I'll never forget. He reached into his sketchbook and pulled out a drawing, A sketch of me, mid-stroke in the pool, the water catching the light like a halo around me. "This is how I see you," he said. "Strong. Alive. Don't let this town dim that." I stared at the drawing, my throat tight. Nobody had ever seen me like that. Not my parents, not my friends, not even myself. In that moment, I knew I was falling for him, and it scared the hell out of me. But the world doesn't let you fall in love without a fight. A week later, I overheard my dad talking to a neighbor about that new guy next door. "He's trouble," my dad said, his voice low. "Heard he got kicked out of Chicago for causing a scene. We don't need that around here." My stomach dropped. I didn't know what Ethan had done, but I knew how rumors worked in this town. They could ruin you before you had a chance to explain. I wanted to ask him about it, but every time I tried, the words stuck in my throat. What if the rumors were true? What if he was hiding something? Still, I couldn't stay away. We kept meeting, stealing moments by the pool or in his cluttered living room, filled with art supplies and half-finished canvases. One night, he kissed me. It was quick, almost hesitant, but set my world on fire. "I wanted to do that since I saw you swimming," he whispered, his forehead pressed against mine. I kissed him back, harder, desperate to hold on to this feeling. But even as I lost myself in him, a part of me braced for the fallout. In a town like this, love like ours wasn't just a secret, it was a rebellion. And rebellions always come with a cost. The days after that kiss felt like living in a dream I was afraid to wake from. Ethan and I were careful, meeting in the quiet hours when the neighborhood slept, our laughter muffled by the hum of cicadas. But the weight of secrecy pressed harder each day, a reminder that our love was a fragile thing in a town built on judgment. One evening, as we sat on his couch, his head resting on my shoulder, I finally found the courage to ask, "Ethan, what happened in Chicago? People are talking." His body tensed, and for a moment I thought he'd pull away. Instead, he sighed, running a hand through his hair. "I figured this would come up," he said, his voice steady but laced with pain. "I didn't get kicked out. I left because I couldn't stay." He told me the story in pieces, like he was pulling shards from a wound. In Chicago, he'd been part of an activist group fighting for queer rights. At a protest, things had gotten heated. Cops, counter-protesters, the works. Ethan had been arrested, not for violence, but for refusing to back down when a cop told him to stop handing out flyers. The charges were dropped, but the fallout was brutal. His family cut him off, his landlord evicted him, and his so-called friends vanished. "I came here to start over," he said, his eyes distant. "But I guess you can't outrun your past." I reached for his hand, my heart aching. "You didn't do anything wrong," I said. "You were fighting for what's right." "Maybe," he replied, his smile bittersweet. "But it cost me everything. I don't regret it, Caleb, but I'm not going to lie. It's lonely." "You're not alone anymore," I said, the words spilling out before I could stop them. His eyes softened, and he kissed me again, slower this time, like he was memorizing the moment. I wanted to believe we could stay like this, hidden but happy, but the world had other plans. The next morning, I found a note slipped under my door. No name, no signature, just 5 words scrawled in black ink. "We know about you, too." My blood ran cold. I crumpled the note, but its weight lingered, a warning I couldn't ignore. I didn't tell Ethan. I couldn't bear to see the fear in his eyes, but I started noticing things. Neighbors who used to wave now avoided my gaze. My dad's comments about Ethan grew sharper, laced with suspicion. The town was closing in, and I wasn't ready. I started pulling back, skipping our late-night talks, making excuses when Ethan asked to meet. He noticed, of course. One night, he cornered me by the pool, his eyes searching mine. "What's going on, Caleb? Did I do something?" "No," I lied, my voice cracking. "I'm just busy." "Bullshit," he said, stepping closer. "You're scared. I get it, but don't shut me out." I wanted to tell him about the note, about the fear clawing at me, but the words wouldn't come. Instead, I turned away, diving into the pool to escape his gaze. The water couldn't wash away the guilt, though. I was letting us down, and I hated myself for it. The breaking point came a week later at the town's annual summer fair. Ethan had convinced me to go, promising we'd just be two friends hanging out. The fair was a blur of cotton candy and carnival lights, but I couldn't shake the feeling of eyes on us. Then I saw my dad, standing by the beer tent, watching us with a look I'd never seen before. Disappointment, maybe, or worse, disgust. I froze, my heart pounding. Ethan followed my gaze and understood immediately. "Caleb," he said softly, "we don't have to hide." But I couldn't move, couldn't speak. All I could see was my dad's face, the note, the whispers that would follow. I mumbled an excuse and bolted, leaving Ethan standing alone in the crowd. That night, I sat by the pool, staring at the water, hating myself. I'd always thought courage was something you found in big moments, fights, protests, grand gestures. But it was the small moments, like standing by the person you love, that tested you most. And I'd failed. When Ethan showed up at my door the next morning, his eyes were red, like he hadn't slept. "I'm not giving up on you," he said, his voice firm. "But you need to decide what you want, Caleb. I can't do this alone." He left me standing there, the weight of his words sinking in. I wanted to chase after him, to tell him I was all in, but fear still held me back. That night, I found another note under my door. "Leave him or everyone knows." This time, there was a photo, a blurry shot of us by the pool, our hands brushing under the water. Panic clawed at me. Someone was watching us, someone who wanted to tear us apart. I knew I had to tell Ethan, but the thought of dragging him into this mess made me sick. Already lost so much. Could I ask him to risk it all again? I sat on the edge of my bed, the photo trembling in my hands. The pool, the fairy lights, our moment. It was all there, captured and twisted into a threat. I wanted to burn it, to pretend it didn't exist, but the truth was staring me in the face. Someone wanted to destroy what Ethan and I had. I didn't sleep that night. By dawn, I was at Ethan's door, the photo and note clutched in my fist. When he opened the door, his face softened, then hardened as he saw my expression. "What's wrong?" he asked, pulling me inside. I handed him the note and photo, my voice shaking as I explained. His jaw tightened, but he didn't look surprised. "This isn't new to me," he said, tossing the photo onto his coffee table. "People like this, they thrive on fear. They want us to hide, to break. But what if they tell everyone?" I said, my voice barely a whisper. "My parents, my job, I could lose everything." Ethan's eyes met mine, steady and fierce. "You could, but you could also gain something they can't take away, yourself." His words hit like a punch. I'd spent years hiding, convincing myself it was easier to stay silent than to fight. But looking at Ethan, who'd already lost so much and still stood tall, I felt ashamed. He deserved better than my cowardice. "I'm scared," I admitted, my voice breaking. "But I don't want to lose you." He stepped closer, his hand finding mine. "Then don't," he said simply. "We face this together." For the first time, I felt a flicker of courage. Not the kind that makes you fearless, but the kind that pushes you forward despite the fear. We spent the day talking, planning. Ethan suggested we go public on our terms, tell my parents before someone else could. I wasn't ready, but I agreed to think about it. For now, we'd be careful, but we wouldn't let the notes win. The next week was a tightrope walk. We avoided the pool, meeting instead in Ethan's living room or at a coffee shop an hour away, where nobody knew us. But the notes kept coming, slipped under my door, taped to my mailbox. Each one was worse. "Faggots don't belong here. Leave or regret it." I stopped showing them to Ethan, afraid he'd do something reckless. He'd already been through too much. I couldn't let him fight my battles. Then it escalated. One night, I came home to find my pool vandalized. Red paint splattered across the water, spelling out "Get out." My parents were away for the weekend, thank God, but the sight made me sick. I called Ethan, and he was there in minutes, his face pale but resolute. "We need to find out who's doing this," he said, his voice low. "This isn't just notes anymore." We spent hours cleaning the pool, scrubbing away the hate. As we worked, Ethan told me about the protests in Chicago, how he'd faced down worse than this and come out stronger. "They want you to feel small," he said. "Don't let them." But I was crumbling. The next day, I went to the hardware store, my hands still stained with faint traces of red paint. My boss, a gruff older man named Tom, pulled me aside. "Heard some talk about you in that neighbor," he said, his eyes narrowing. "Hope it's not true, Caleb. We don't need that kind of trouble here." I mumbled something about rumors and got back to work, my chest tight. When I got home, another note was waiting. Last warning. I broke down, sobbing by the pool, the place that used to be my escape, now a battleground. Ethan found me there, his arms wrapping around me before I could push him away. "I can't do this," I whispered. "I'm not strong like you." "You are," he insisted, his voice fierce. "You're stronger than you know, and I'm not going anywhere." He stayed with me that night, sleeping on the couch while I tossed and turned. In the morning, he had an idea. "Let's set a trap," he said. "Catch whoever's leaving these notes. If we know who it is, we can stop them." It was risky, but I was desperate. We rigged a small security camera by my mailbox, hidden in the bushes. For 2 nights, nothing happened. Then, on the 3rd night, the camera caught something, a figure in a hoodie slipping a note under my door. The footage was grainy, but I recognized the walk, the shape of the shoulders. It was my cousin Jake. Jake was family, someone I'd grown up with, shared Christmases with. He was also the kind of guy who threw around slurs like they were nothing, who'd always been quick to judge. But this was betrayal on a level I couldn't process. "We confront him," Ethan said, his voice hard. "He doesn't get to do this," and walk away. I wasn't sure I had the strength, but Ethan's resolve gave me courage. We planned to confront Jake the next day, but first, I had to face something even harder, my parents. They were coming home that night, and I couldn't keep hiding. If I was going to fight for Ethan, for us, I had to start with the truth. My parents' car pulled into the driveway as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the yard. I stood by the pool, my stomach churning, Ethan's hand brushing mine for a moment before he stepped back. "You got this," he whispered, then retreated to his house to give me space. I'd rehearsed the words 100 times, but when my mom hugged me and my dad clapped me on the shoulder, they stuck in my throat. We sat in the living room, the TV humming in the background, and I forced myself to speak. "There's something I need to tell you," I started, my voice shaking. "I'm gay, and I'm in love with Ethan." The silence that followed was deafening. My mom's eyes widened, her hand covering her mouth. My dad's face hardened, his jaw tight. "Caleb," he said finally, "this isn't you. You're confused." "I'm not confused," I said, my voice steadier now. "This is who I am." The argument that followed was brutal. My dad talked about family values, about what the neighbors would think. My mom cried, asking where she'd gone wrong. I tried to explain, to make them see Ethan the way I did, but their words cut deep. "You're throwing your life away," my dad said, his voice cold. "For what? Some guy." "He's not just some guy," I snapped. "He's the best thing that's ever happened to me." I left the house that night, my heart in pieces, and went to Ethan's. He held me as I cried, his arms a lifeline. "They'll come around," he said, but I wasn't sure I believed him. All I knew was that I couldn't go back to hiding, not after tasting what it felt like to be free. The next morning, we confronted Jake. Ethan and I waited at his apartment, the security footage loaded on my phone. When Jake opened the door, his smirk faded as he saw us. "What do you want?" he asked, his tone defensive. "We know it's you," I said, holding up the phone. "The notes, the paint." "Why, Jake?" He didn't deny it. Instead, he laughed, a harsh, ugly sound. "You think you could just flaunt that shit around here? People talk, Caleb. They don't want your kind in this town." "My kind?" I echoed, anger rising. "You're my family. How could you do this?" "You're not my family if you're with him." Jake spat, glaring at Ethan. "You're a disgrace." Ethan stepped forward, his voice calm but steel-edged. "You don't get to decide who Caleb is, or who I am. You're the one hiding behind notes and paint, too weak to face us." Jake lunged, but I stepped between them, my heart pounding. "Enough," I said. "This stops now. If you come near us again, I'm taking this to the police." Jake backed off, muttering curses, but I could see the fear in his eyes. He knew he had proof. As we left, Ethan squeezed my hand. "You were incredible," he said, and for the first time, I felt like I might be. But the victory was short-lived. Word spread fast. Jake wasn't the only one watching. By the next day, the whispers were everywhere. At the hardware store, Tom told me to take a week off, to let things cool down. Neighbors stopped talking when I walked by. Even my parents barely spoke to me, their disappointment a wall between us. Ethan and I clung to each other, finding refuge in stolen moments. One night, as we lay on a blanket by the pool, staring at the stars, he traced circles on my palm. "We could leave," he said softly. "Start over somewhere new, somewhere we don't have to hide." The idea was tempting, but it also hurt. This was my home, flawed as it was. I didn't want to run. I wanted to fight, for us, for the right to exist as we were. But the cost was mounting, and I wasn't sure how much more I could take. Then came the final blow. I got a call from the hardware store. Tom, his voice clipped, saying they didn't need me back. "Business is slow," he said, but I knew the truth. I've been fired for being me. That night, I broke down in Ethan's arms, the weight of it all too much. "I don't know if I can do this," I said, my voice raw. "Maybe Jake's right. Maybe we don't belong here." Ethan pulled back, his eyes fierce. "Don't you dare believe that," he said. "You belong wherever you choose to be. And I choose to be with you." His words gave me strength, but the reality was grim. Without a job, with my family barely speaking to me, the future felt like a cliff's edge. Ethan suggested we talk to a lawyer about the harassment, maybe even go public to expose the hate. It was a terrifying idea, but I was starting to see that hiding wasn't an option anymore. As we planned our next steps, I found a letter in my mailbox. Not a threat this time, but a note from my mom. "I don't understand this, Caleb, but I'm trying. I love you." It wasn't acceptance, not yet, but it was a crack in the wall. For the first time, I felt a spark of hope. Hope is a fragile thing, but it's also a fire. That note from my mom kept me going as Ethan and I prepared to fight back. We met with a lawyer in Columbus, a kind woman named Sarah who specialized in discrimination cases. She looked at the notes, the photo, the security footage, and nodded. "You've got a case," she said. "But it won't be easy. Small towns don't like change." We didn't want to sue anyone. Not yet. We just wanted the harassment to stop. Sarah suggested a public statement, something to take control of the narrative. Ethan was all in, but I hesitated. Going public meant no turning back. It meant the whole town knowing, maybe the whole world. But Ethan was right. Hiding hadn't protected us. It had only made us smaller. So we wrote a letter to the local paper, not accusing anyone, just telling our story. We talked about love, about fear, about the right to exist. Ethan sketched a drawing to go with it, a silhouette of two hands touching underwater, simple and powerful. We sent it off, my heart in my throat, and waited. The response was a storm. Some neighbors left supportive notes, flowers even, on our doorsteps. Others were crueler. More notes, more whispers, a brick through Ethan's window one night. But something shifted. People started talking, not just about us, but about the town, about what it meant to belong. A local LGBTQ group reached out, offering support. A few kids from the high school started a petition to make the town fair a safe space next year. My parents were the hardest part. My mom started coming around, asking questions, trying to understand. My dad was slower, but one night he sat me down. "I don't get it," he said, his voice gruff. "But you're my son. I don't want to lose you." It wasn't perfect, but it was enough. For now. Ethan and I kept fighting, not just for us, but for anyone else in this town who felt like they had to hide. We started a small art project, painting murals around town. Bright, bold images of love and resilience. Ethan's sketches became our voice, and my words, finally finding their way to paper, became our story. One evening, a year after that first splash, we stood by the pool, the fairy lights glowing above us. The town wasn't perfect, neither were we, but we'd carve out a space for ourselves. Ethan took my hand, his fingers warm against mine. "You ready for what's next?" he asked, his grin as bright as ever. I looked at him, at the life we were building, and nodded. Yeah, I said, I'm ready. We jumped into the pool together, the water closing over us, cool and familiar. As we surfaced, laughing, I realized something. Love doesn't just change you. It changes everything. Your heart, your home, the world around you. And no matter what came next, we'd face it together, swimming through the deep end, unafraid.